Hey, what's up guys, it's Bakes here and thank you for joining me for this episode of my Tracklist rankings. Today's album that I'll be ranking its tracklist is by one of my all-time favourite bands, Neck Deep. It's their third full-length studio album from the year 2017, titled The Peace and the Panic. Now, if you haven't checked it out already, I have done a full-length review of this album. I'll make sure to put it in the description below if you want to check that out. But of course, in today's video, I'll be ranking its 11-song tracklist from my least favourite song to favourite song. And let me just say straight off the bat, this was a super hard tracklist ranking to do because I really do love this album. And not only is it an album that's very consistent and solid with the songs that it puts out, but also a lot of variety. There's some heavier leaning pop punk songs, but then there's some more mellow and catchy ones to just sing along with, but then there's also a lot of emotional tracks. So as I said, not just a solid delivery of songs here, a lot of different variety and moods to pick from. And as I said, this was a really hard tracklist ranking to do, but as usual, I'll be ranking it from my least favourite song to favourite song on the album. And make sure to let me know some of your favourite tracks off this album in the comments below, guys. But as usual, we'll get straight into this now, starting off with my number 11, my least favourite song on the album. So let me just quickly say again, I'm sure you gathered it from my introduction, but I don't think there are any actual bad songs on this album. However, with my tracklist ranking, I have to start somewhere. So my number 11, I'm going to go with the song Parachute. This is a track that has become fairly popular with fans over time, and it's a song that ended up getting a music video and heavy promotion after the album dropped. But to be completely honest, I've never been a massive fan of this song. Just in comparison with the rest of the album, it maybe just feels a little bit too tame for me. I often speak about songs keeping it simple, and the fact of them keeping it simple is sort of what works to its benefit. And let me just say, again, I still really do enjoy this song, but compared to the rest of the tracks on the album with a little bit more variety and flavour, it just doesn't really hit in comparison. But when I'm in the right mood, this song can be a cool vibe, fun, simple lyrics, and like I said, the only overall, negative I sort of have is just the fact that in comparison with the rest of the songs, it just doesn't hit the same. But still a cool track. My number 11, I'm going to give it to Parachute. And coming in for my number 10 spot, I have the track Critical Mistake, which I feel like is a song with a better example of what I feel like Parachute could have done with its simplicity. Because again, this is another very simple song. It's pretty simple with its instrumentals. It keeps it pretty chill and mellow. Catchy verses and a fun hook. I actually really like the writing and the lyrics in this song. However, there is one piece of writing and lyrics, I actually can't remember it off the top of my head, but it does sort of confuse me a little bit. I just feel like it's sort of going against what the rest of the song was sort of about, but take that with a grain of salt because that's honestly probably me just being a little bit confused. But still a fun song. It's one of those simple pleasure songs, doing nothing flashy. It flies by, it's catchy enough, so I'm just going to wrap this one up here. My number 10 goes to the track Critical Mistakes. So I understand that this is a ranking video, and in order to rank these songs I have to make some pretty tough decisions, and this is just going to be one of many. But coming in at my number 9, I have the track 1970 something. And the reason why this was such a tough decision for myself is because I feel like with this song, the band actually took a pretty big risk, and I also feel like the risk paid off, especially comparing it to future risks that the band took with songs on their follow-up album, All Distortions Are Intentional, which I feel like didn't quite stick the landing that they were going for. But majority of this song instrumentally is fairly tame, and it has a pretty chill, swinging 70s style vibe to it, which I think really works. And I really appreciate the choice to just try something different. And it matches the vibe of the writing and the song, but sometimes, if I'm being honest, it just doesn't always hit the mood that I'm feeling. However, when it does hit, trust me, it hits in a major fucking way. And where it stands out to me most of all in this song is lyrically. It tells the story of lead singer Ben Barlow's parents, and their journey through love and life, and then the eventual death of his father, which is told in this heartbreaking bridge compared to earlier where it was a bit more bright and joyful. And in the end, it just belts out and picks up into this heavier tone, which makes you look back and think, wow, what a cool way to put forward a song and tell this story. And as I said, it feels like it's a risk that was put forward on this album. And I do feel like it works. As I said, it just doesn't hit every single time I listen to it. So my number 9, I'm going to give it to 1970 something. Coming in at my number 8, I have the track Wish You Were Here, which is actually a song that is very similar lyrically and with its subject matter to my previously mentioned pick 1970 something, this time with just a more acoustic approach, this being the only acoustic song on the album. Now, I skipped over this when I brought up 1970 something, and without getting too personal or going too deep, I just wanted to be honest and, be transparent with you guys. Both of those songs hit lyrically for me due to the fact of the passing of my mum. More so the fact that this album only came out a couple of months after my mum had passed away. So, as I said, Neck Deep, one of my all-time favourite bands, and just hearing some songs written by them about something that was very personal to me and I could definitely relate to, just really hit on a different level. Though there are some differences and it's not a complete like for like, 1970 something was written about a dad passing away from what you can gather from the lyrics being a heart attack, and this one is about the passing of a friend, but the message and the emotion is the same, missing someone that has died and just wishing that they were still here with you. And as I said, that's just something that hit emotionally for me and something I could connect to. And like I said, the timing and the message was just so relatable, and it still packs a punch to this day whenever I listen to it. But without getting too far off just what makes the song good as well. Just really good writing, really well told story. Sometimes I do skip over it because I don't feel like listening to something that puts me in a bit more of a lower mood. But you can't take away from what a good and well done song this is. So my number 8 goes to the track Wish You Were Here. Coming in at my number 7, I have the track Where Do We Go When We Go, which is the third song in a row, at least on my list, that features the theme of death in a way, and also one of the 2 leading singles for the album. I've actually heard a few people say that they're not major fans of this song just purely because of the subject matter. I'm sure you could gather from the title, Where Do We Go When We Go? It's talking about what happens when we eventually die. And I guess when you look at it from that sort of perspective, from a dark point of view, it can be a little bit grim and depressing, especially because it is the closing song for the album. So if you're listening to it from front to back, the last thing that you're hearing about is, what happens when we die. But I've never really looked at it like that, especially because when you actually listen to the song, it's actually sort of talking about it from a positive perspective. It's more so saying, make use of the time that we have here, because yes, the question is out there, we don't know what happens when we die, but make the most of the time that we have here while we are alive and on Earth. The chorus and the melody is a twist on the nursery rhyme Rain, Rain, Go Away, which I think is pretty cool, and it could have been pretty cringe because there was sort of that trend for a while where you mainly saw it on TikTok where people were getting nursery rhymes and doing a twist on it. Does everyone remember that one where it was like twinkle, twinkle, little bitch, something, and like it got really big and everyone was calling it cringe? That could have been this, but I think Neck Deep personally pulled it off. You got to remember, Neck Deep did it first. I actually don't remember anyone else doing a nursery rhyme twist on a song before this, but that could just be me and what I listened to. Maybe someone did, but I think they pulled it off and it was pretty cool. I do like this song, so coming in at my number 7, I have Where Do We Go When We Go. Coming in at my number 6, I have the track In Bloom. Upon first release when this album came out, I remember genuinely believing that this song could be a future emo anthem with a little bit of a pop-punk twist, obviously. But 7 years later, unfortunately, I don't think it's necessarily grown into that role, especially in a mainstream light, which I feel like it honestly could have. But all that aside, in its own right, for what it is on the album, it definitely is an emo anthem. It's got this simple, almost melancholic verses swinging into a gloomy yet powerful chorus that you just can't help but sing along with. Honestly, going into this list and track list ranking, I thought it was going to be much higher. In fact, when I did the first draft of my track list ranking, it was in my top three. But I think I've sort of just grown accustomed to the brilliance of this song to the point where it just doesn't floor me like it did at first. But don't get me wrong, still an amazing song. Obviously, it's my number six. But I think also just being a pop punk kid and the type of music that I like and sort of the typical sounds that Neck Deep normally put forward, I do gravitate to a lot of other songs over this one. But as I said, I don't want to take anything away from this song's brilliance. As I said, I do genuinely think that this is a anthem off the album. So coming in at my number six, I have the track In Bloom. Coming in at my number five, I have the track The Grand Illusion. I don't understand how this song is so underrated, even though it's only the third track on the album. I remember from the very first time hearing this song, something about it just grabbed me and I could tell that it was doing something different. The song is actually built on the foundations of a very typical pop punk neck deep track, but then you can tell that there's something heavy lingering and hanging about, and then it just goes bang on that bridge. The bridge delivers not only badass instrumentals, giving the song a little bit more flair, but then also possibly the heaviest vocal showing from Ben Barlow. I was going to say on the album, but it could be ever. Piercing his voice, screaming some really solid emo lyrics, crawling up the walls, claustrophobic in my own skin, just so fucking badass. And actually, now that I think about it, the lyrics all the way through the song, not just in the bridge, are really solid, so that's a really cool thing as well. But even if the bridge wasn't in this song, it still is a really fucking solid showing. But just having that bridge there, as I said, just really boosts the song up for me personally. The song is just so good. It has some added attitude, some heavy flair, and just altogether it's a really fire song. So my number five goes to The Grand Illusion. The track Happy Judgment Day comes in at my number 4, and it's another one of the two leading singles for this album, and I feel like this one has the little bit more replay value for myself at least. It's not the heaviest entry on this album, but it's definitely got to be in the top 3. It just feels like it gives the album just that little bit more attitude, especially with the lyrics, the edgy, fed-up tone of this song, the way of the world and how particular people act. And it does get across that message without being too preachy and cringe and trying to be one of those wannabe anthems. I feel like it does genuinely do a good job. And from that awesome opening line, what a time to be alive, wake up and smell the dynamite, I just think that's really fucking cool. And how the chorus is handled also, the band is really giving it their all, with a really catchy hook that ends up with Ben Barlow just saying that really somber line, flames, and I just really like how that chorus wraps up. Just a really cool song that has obviously kept pace from being one of the leading singles. So my number 4 goes to the track Happy Judgment Day. Breaking into my top 3 and coming in at my number 3 spot, I have the track Heavy Lies. My personal pick for most underrated song on this album. I've just never really heard anyone bring it up before. I've never seen it pop up in a live set, so for me it's got to be most underrated track. But just super catchy and punchy, well, pun not intended, having some heavy lyrics or maybe some more meaningful lyrics than what people would take at face value. During the closing of this song, hearing the line, I've heard some heavy lies like I love you, while being sung just accompanied by a single guitar. Man, it's brutal, and you can just feel it in Ben's vocals and, you know, in the tone of the song. And maybe compared to some of the more well-known tracks and singles, that it's not quite as heavy of a hitter, but for me, I just find myself never really skipping over this song, and at the end of the day, this is my personal track list ranking, so I definitely knew I wanted to have it higher on my list. But I really do feel like this is a hidden gem, so maybe if you haven't heard it in a while and need a refresher, go back and check out Heavy Lies. Coming in for my number 2, I have the track Don't Wait. I remember before this album's release reading the news that Sam Carter, the lead vocalist of Architects, for those who don't know, was meant to be featuring on a track from this album, and I became instantly intrigued. I could really picture it in my head working, and yet when I heard the song for the first time, and still to this day, I'm always blown away. The song itself has to be the heaviest done by the band to date, especially noticeable if you've ever seen this song in a live set. But with that being said, it's also not off the complete path of what Neck Deep can do either. Looking back at the song, it's never like, oh wow, where did this heavy ass song come from? Like, I still feel like it sort of fits the mold of what Neck Deep can do. Just amped up the juice and gave the song a little bit more attitude and guts. And not just in the instrumentals either, also in the vocal performances and lyrics too. The lyrics are kind of your standard rebellious and rise against approach. But then once again, when Sam Carter comes in with his screams in the bridge, it's just like, oh fuck. The match of the clean and unclean vocals that ride out the rest of the track is just so awesome, and overall it's a great track. So coming in at my number 2, I have the song Don't Wait. And finally, coming in at my number 1, I have the opening track of the album being Motion Sickness. I don't even know where to start with this song because it could be one of the band's best songs to date, and with it being the opening track, it just starts the album off with a banger. This song is a great example of how well-oiled of a machine and force Neck Deep are when it comes to the pop-punk genre. It's honestly pretty much everything that you could ask for. Yes, maybe it's a little bit more polished than some of their other great pop-punk efforts off previous albums like Kylie Ma and Can't Kick Up the Roots, and I say that because those songs are a little bit more rough cut around the edges, and I honestly do like a little bit more rough cut around the edges when it comes to my pop-punk songs. But this song just hits on everything. Its lyrics, its instrumentals, the pacing, the flow, so catchy. And just before moving off the lyrics, just the story of the journey going through life, the ups and downs, hence the title of the track, Motion Sickness. Going into this track list ranking, I honestly almost cemented this one in as being my number 1 straight away, and that's really saying something because honestly, this was a really hard track list ranking to do, with the rest of the catalogue just really close picks, and I really feel like there are no bad songs on this album. But just having Motion Sickness there and pretty much guaranteeing that it was going to be my number 1 took a little bit of weight off my shoulders. But with that being said, just a great overall track. So my number 1 goes to Motion Sickness. So thank you guys for joining me for this episode of my tracklist rankings. Of course, as usual, if you have heard this album before, I want to know some of your favourites in the comments below. Feel free to rank the whole tracklist if you want, or just let me know a couple of your favourites, or maybe your most underrated pick for the album. Feel free to do that. But then also, guys, if you want to know my complete thoughts of the album as a whole, and what I give it for a score out of 10, go check out my random album review for this album, The Peace and the Panic by Neck Deep. If I remember, I'll link it in the description below. So as I said, if you want to know my complete thoughts of the album, feel free to flick over to that video. But thank you for joining me again, guys. I always appreciate it. And I'll see you for another video, I'm sure, very soon enough. So thank you, guys.